trying to find peace or happiness, and the opposing option being suffering. Well, the nature of the mind is always trying to find happiness, more and more happiness, or what it imagines is happiness, or really it's pleasure. People, they crave pleasurable feeling. And because they have painful feelings, that drives them to want to create and get more pleasurable feelings to kind of mask out or dampen down the pain of the painful feelings. So it's because of pain that people crave pleasure, because pain and pleasure are the two opposites, the two polar opposites, like light and darkness, pain and suffering, and all the other dualities of the mind. Nothing exists without an opposing, opposite type of meaning. And this is what is called duality. And the mind is always caught and fluctuating between these dualities. Gain and loss, pleasure and pain, sickness and health, because of impermanence. Anyway, so people are trying to find happiness in the world, but the only way they know is in the external objects of the sensory realm, because, as I mentioned, they've lost that connection with the inherent happiness of present moment awareness. And when the baby again reaches about 6 months old, it starts to lose that natural connection it had from birth, and gets focused now in the external world, and little by little, over a period of some years, that gulf gets wider and wider and wider until it totally loses any conscious kind of memory of that present moment awareness, and gets fixed in the past and future, as we talked about. So the question is, some people derive happiness at the expense of somebody else in terms of their actions, thoughts that stem from hatred, greed, or envy. That's right, because the ego gets happiness out of dominating others. It gets happiness because it's better. The ego is always a measuring device. It's measuring oneself in terms of others, and it always wants to be superior. He wants to be seen as the wisest or the best or whatever, the strongest, the most beautiful. And you can see that in life and in people. But it's driven by the ego consciousness, and the ego consciousness is basically a delusion. But it's been ingrained in society in the course of evolution, in passing on those traits and so on, that in the minds of most people, these habits and so on of the ego are passed on, because the child, once it starts gaining its self-consciousness, its parents start saying, yes, exert yourself, you got to excel, and these people are bad and you're good, and get what you want out of the world. I mean, that's a generalization, but by and large, that's the way people are kind of brought up. And they buy into that storyline because no one else is telling them a different story. So anyway, people may seem to get happiness out of dominating others, out of hurting others, out of defeating others. But it's a short-lived happiness. And in the end, it may well come back to bite them. Because of all of our actions, so we do a lot of negative actions, and we might not always reap the painful consequences of them now. But those seeds of those unwholesome actions of greed, hatred, and delusion will lay dormant, and they will manifest and cause their painful results years down the line even. let's say if you tell a bunch of lies or you cheat somebody, you may not get found out right away. But somewhere down the line, like we see in all these cases of politicians and others, these dirty skeletons are brought out of the closet. Somehow, one or other, they manifest and they come back to haunt these people and destroy careers and cause people to commit suicide and, get sick and die lonely and miserable. So this is the consequence, the karmic consequence, you could say, or payback for these negative actions. So you may not suffer immediately by doing these negative actions, but somewhere down the line they're going to come out. So, or at least you suffer your own guilt, knowing that you did that, but yet people still don't, it may not prick their consciousness, but somewhere down the line, somebody else is going to prick their consciousness, as we see that's happening in so many cases. So, anyway, yeah, people are trying to be happy, but because they don't know what suffering is, they keep creating suffering. And that's why actually the Buddha's teaching on the Four Noble Truths is very unique. And it's different from most other types of religious philosophies, or even other types of philosophies. That the Buddha talked about suffering. He didn't talk about happiness immediately. Although he did talk about the end of suffering. And if you have the end of suffering, then what's left? Well, assume that then you'd be happy. So the Buddha didn't directly mention happiness as something to strive for, but he wanted you to understand what is suffering, what is the cause of suffering, and how you remove the cause of suffering. And the way to live, think, and meditate that will help you to remove the cause of suffering. But a lot of people, they just want to be happy. And they don't want to learn about what is suffering or the cause of suffering. So even though they might be doing things to be happy, surround them with all the, toys and other gadgets or trophy brides or whatever. All this so-called, sensory objects. But while they're doing that, they're telling lies, cheating others, abusing others in one way or another, and planting the seeds for the suffering that's going to negate that happiness at some point and come down on their head much stronger. So this is the Buddha's approach. He didn't have to talk about happiness, because if you remove the cause of suffering, then it stands to reason that you'd be happy. But happiness in the Dhamma doesn't mean having a big tummy going up and down and jiggling when you're laughing. But that's what people sometimes equate. They see a meditator, meditating, and maybe, the face looks a little bit, kind of stern, but inside their mind could be blissed out and fizzing over with bliss and joy of the mind just being in the present moment. It doesn't mean you have a big Cheshire cat grin on your face. It's about the quality of the freedom of the awareness and consciousness. So this idea of happiness actually is a misnomer, because people, they have a wrong idea what happiness is. It's about perfect contentment. It's about being innerly fulfilled and complete, not needing anything. The state of, complete coolness and contentment. So not necessarily you're going around laughing all the time, or outwardly appearing to be happy, but it's inwardly your mind is calm and cool, and it's grounded in awareness and totally at one, in the present moment, without any greed, hatred, negative thoughts, or unhappiness. So that's why the Buddha didn't need to talk directly about happiness. He talked about removing the cause of suffering. And then you'll automatically be happy. A lot of people, they know I've been a monk for more than 40 years. And they imagine, you can't have any sex life, you can't drink, you can't go to parties, can't go to Vegas, all these sort of things. They imagine that poor monks are deprived of any of the good things of life. That's it's maybe an exaggeration or generalization, but so they think, are you happy? And I tell them, I'm not unhappy. Because they don't know what happiness is really. So I tell them, I'm not unhappy. And so if you're not unhappy, then stands to reason, then what are you? Well, content or happy, let's say. So that's why, anyway, you don't have to try to be happy. But that's what everybody's doing. They're trying to be happy. They're trying to boost their egos. They're trying to get enough money to do whatever in the world they think could buy them happiness. But at the same time, as I mentioned, they're doing the very things that are going to bring forth unhappiness in the future. So we don't try to be happy. We just try to understand what is suffering. You have to understand what is suffering in the first place. Because sometimes I, give a talk somewhere and somebody says, objects to all this suffering. Why do Buddhists always talk about suffering? All you hear is about suffering, suffering, suffering. I want to hear about happiness. I said, I don't suffer. I can't relate to this Buddhist teaching about suffering. So I asked them, well, do you ever have any disturbed sleep or bad dreams at night? You go, well, my, wife plays around, around, one of my children is a drug addict or any number of things. And so you worry about that? Well, yeah, oh, that's not suffering. Oh, no, that's normal, they say. So these people have it difficult to understand really what is suffering. They think suffering is just getting banged up in a car accident or getting some horrible disease or something like that. But no. The deeper meaning of suffering is the mental suffering, the discontent and the disconnection from the truth and just being consumed by your ego. That is the real suffering from the Dhamma point of view, not getting broken bones or other types of physical suffering, but it's the mental suffering of not knowing the truth. As I mentioned today about the suffering, maybe I didn't finish that train of thought, but I mentioned there's 3 levels of suffering. The physical level, which we already discussed, and then the mental level, not getting what you want, getting what you don't want, that general discontent, dissatisfaction, always wanting something more, or fear of losing things. And then there's the suffering of not knowing the truth. Some people might be quite okay in the body, maybe they don't get sick too much, not any serious kind of physical sufferings, maybe things in their family is, quite hunky-dory and, no big problems. Maybe their mind isn't suffering too much, They have what they need and this and that. But still, they may be disconnected from the truth. They may still be, get lonely or, want to be elsewhere, as I mentioned. And that is really the deepest level of the suffering, being disconnected from awareness and just being lost in your own ego-centered thoughts of past and future, even if they're relatively harmless. But anyway, these are all, deep issues or understandings of the Dhamma, which you learn about as you observe and study your own mind. Gradually, you begin to understand those things. I hope that answered that question. Okay, this last one, not sure what this is all about, but I am dyslexic. I've always reversed letters since the first grade. So my question is there really a D-O-G? Or maybe he's spelling G-O-D, right? If he's dyslexic, he's reading the letters that we would pronounce as dog. If he's reversing them, if that's what dyslexic means, I don't really know myself. But saying reverse the letters, it would be G-O-D. Is there a God? Of course, that's the big question a lot of people have, and in most religions of the world, God is a prominent fixture, or and so that question is, you're going to have to answer for yourself. But the word God means different things. In Buddhism, you find many gods, not just one. There's many gods in the Buddhist pantheon, but none of them is a creator God. One specific person that was supposed to have created the earth or the universe and rules over it and governs the operation of everybody's body and mind and their fate. Now that kind of a God is not believed. The Buddha said he never found one of those. But there's other godlike beings with, kind of pure kind of qualities of love and compassion and things like that, but they're not creator gods. So in that sense, if you find one, let us know. But, people believe there's one, whether they've actually seen it or found it or know it, that's a matter of belief. But, people can believe what they want. But within the Buddhist tradition and within the practice of meditation, really, if there was a God, it would be your mind. Because this God is what creates your world, as I mentioned before. And God is, and your actions determine your fate. So your mind determines whether you're going to suffer or be happiness in the future due to the law of karma. So it's your mind. So if anything is God from a Buddhist point of view, you'd say it's the mind, your mind. That it creates your own heaven or your own hell, your own happiness or your own suffering, depending upon your understanding and the way that you think and live and so on. And that's the house builder too. Karma is the house builder, which propels this mind at the time of death into another existence. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into this deeper type of Buddhist sort of understanding at this point. But anyway, so let's leave it at that. But if there's a dog that goes bow wow and barks, yeah, there's a dog. There's also a cat that goes meow. And there's also everything else that exists. But we have to understand how they have come to be. And, they all have the right to live. And they're all born and they're all going to die, just as we are. And all those energies are just transmuted and recycled. Anyway, again, I don't want to get too far gone into that. But just to sort of finish that question. Okay? So